Have you ever been sitting in a meeting and heard someone say that they're a solution architect and literally had no idea what that meant? Well, you're not alone. Most businesses also can't clearly define it, but that's why we're here today to tell you what that is, how it fits into a team, all the things you need to know to have a clear understanding of what a solution architect is, what it does, and how one can be beneficial to your organization. Let's get into it. Hi, everybody. My name is Graham Bischoff. In case you're wondering and you don't know who I am, I've been in the Salesforce and business system ecosystem for over 15 years. I've built teams, worked for some companies you may have heard of, like Yelp and Google, but I also built my own consulting agency. And I think that's going to be really important for today's conversation. So this is more of a larger theme that we have going on or topic, which is how to build out systems teams, their roles within those teams, and who you should be hiring for them. And today we're going to talk about solution engineers. More specifically, we're going to talk about them because the title tends to only ever show up in consulting agencies. Very rarely will it show up as an internal team. So I just want to be very specific about that, but that doesn't mean they can't fit into the general team structure or that you'll ever run into them or use them, because most people have probably heard the term. They just don't know what it means. And then also there's just a lot of disagreement, we would say, between different companies and what they think the actual title versus job role is. And so we'll try to break some of that down today. So we're going to talk about what is a solution architect, where do they fit in the team structure, and then finally, how can you best use them in getting your implementations and projects completed with the team that you have. All right, let's begin. Okay, so what, or who rather, is a solution architect? Well, it's someone who kind of lives a dual life, a double agent, if you will. And the reason they mostly work at consulting agencies is a bit of their life is pre-sales, right? So they have to be able to talk to a customer and lay out a roadmap at a high level of all the solutions they're going to do to fit their business needs, right? And then they have to turn around and help a team deliver all of those solutions that they had planned themselves. Now, sometimes companies will mix it up and keep people on both sides of the fence, which I don't really agree with. I mean, it's kind of like a rude neighbor, one sells something and then throws it over the fence and the other person has to deal with it. It's just like, it's not good. So what I really like to think about then is what are the things that make a good solution architect? And really, when you hear architect, you think technical capabilities. And that's really not true. What they can architect at a high level is basically like feature sets and an understanding of integration capabilities. And not low-level integration capabilities. Again, we want to remain high level. So when someone's like, oh, we need to support a support team, they're like, oh, well, we'll go get you Service Hub or Sales or Service Cloud or some sort of customer management system that allows them to take in cases, understand the channels that they need. Is this chat? Is this phone? Is this email? Is this, web supported? Whatever it's going to be. They have an idea of like all the abilities of the different platforms that are out there, and then they can solution what they think is best to put all of those features and pieces together so that that customer will end up getting an overarching plan that allows them to implement these things and fulfill that higher level business need of like, oh, we just need to be able to answer customer questions somehow, right? And so they'll be able to say like, oh, you need to go buy this, you need to build that, you need to go do this. And really comes down to like a build versus buy conversation that they end up having with a lot of customers. And then after you've planned that out, they've told you what to go do, which is a very long procurement process typically. And at the end of that, they then have to tell a team of technical folks, project managers, BSAs, etc., how to go fulfill that. It kind of makes them the quarterback of the team. But you want like a good quarterback, like Peyton Manning, not a Mark Sanchez.
Tom Moore then at Indianapolis, the offensive coordinator. You got a busted play here, and then Sanchez gets hit. The ball is loose, and it's alive.
I have never seen this before in my life. Watch this. Vince Wilfork is going to throw Brandon Moore back into his quarterback.
Yeah, don't get the guy who ran into the other guy's butt. Like, let's just not do that. Don't even get me started on Tom Brady, the GOAT. That's what I think of Tom Brady, the GOAT. Come on. We all know who the real GOAT is. So what do you really want in someone who's a solution architect? Well, you have to make sure you're differentiating between all of these different resources. So they have to be really well-rounded. You can't really dive deep into any one thing because you have to do so many things. You're really a coordinator, not a project manager. And believe me, people get really confused about the difference between a project manager and a solution architect. And oftentimes there's a lot of like Venn diagram overlap, which you completely want to avoid depending on the size of the project. So as soon as it becomes a significant portion of what that solution architect is doing, like throw that to an actual project manager. And we can talk about that role in a different video. But just for now, just understand that they are like the coordinator in chief of everything that's going on. They're synchronizing with sales, making sure that they're selling the right thing. They're putting together a plan and a solution of like what to buy and what to build at a very high level. And then they're coordinating that plan with the technical team to make sure that that gets implemented and delivered in a way that's satisfactory to what their vision was. And so they have to be really good communicators. I mean, like really good communicators, like, got to be able to whisper into the ears and pour honey and all those things into everybody. And especially they don't want to put their foot in the mouth when the salespeople are talking so the deal doesn't get done, or that the executive can't, initialize his plan. And then two, you have to be able to talk to technical people. Now, most solution architects that I know do not understand like code or code level problems to any degree of depth. They understand that things need to be integrated, probably have a good understanding what an API is. But if you ask them to like code anything, that just would not be something they can do. Now, there may be some solution architects who can do that, but definitely not the majority of the case or the majority of the time. Another thing that often gets confused, and we'll get into this when we talk about where they fit into the team, is these are not technical architects. They are not super technical folks. So while they understand a broad set of features and solutions and how those things can technically fit together, kind of like puzzle pieces, but more like better than that your toddler can do. They'll go through that and they'll put all of those together so they can put together a coordinated plan that can be communicated to everyone of how we're going to implement this large project and get this large business objective done through all these technical systems. And that's really the most important part. It's just making sure that they're driving each portion of that to an overall grand vision and they can communicate that very clearly. And so that's what a solution architect is. Next, we'll get into kind of like where they fit into the team. So we'll get into that. All right, so now we're going to get into kind of where this person sits in a team. I previously stated they're like the quarterback of the team, and that's really true for consulting agencies. So this person is going to sit with the sales team when they're selling some stuff, make sure that they're selling the right thing. And then they're going to transition over to delivery and sit with the technical team and the delivery team and just make sure that everything goes well. And the whole time they're probably talking to the customers, and they're probably the first person that they'll talk with, like the customer will talk with when it's going through that. You can kind of think of them, they're kind of like sales engineers, but then they transition to like actual delivery when the project's going on as well. So they're never kind of like here and then gone forever. That's not really what happens. And so you really have to have that complex of a team to want to take on a solution engineer. And this is why internal teams don't really have that. Like most of the time, this role would be filled by operational folks in the department in which this is operating in, right? So you have some executive, they have a broader vision for the company with business goals. Then they pull in their operational people to say like, okay, like what do we need to build or buy, or how do we do that? Or they'll have some counterpart in the IT world, which will help them through that from a technical perspective. But that position doesn't really exist as an internal one, because like most of those folks will like know the systems they want to use or be already set up with the systems they want to use. So they don't have a lot of variability to be like, oh, we should totally like deprecate our entire CRM and move to this different CRM and this different, marketing automation platform or data analytics tool or whatever it is. You don't really have a lot of ability to like completely rebuild your tech stack as an internal employee most of the time, right? There's a lot of parties involved. It's not something, but an outside consultant can totally suggest all of those things. They may not prove that that's a good idea, but like they can definitely suggest all those things. And the solution architect is one who's going to come in and recommend some of those changes. And oftentimes the internal IT team that they're recommending this against is not going to like those ideas. Like they had their vision of what's going on, The solution architect has a different one, and they have to sell the internal teams on why that's happening. But that's not to say that internal teams can't utilize these folks really well. For the exact reason I just stated, that they may be upset or dislike what that person says, they can totally use that external position to help fulfill a tech stack that they want, right? So if you find a solution architect that aligns with your internal vision as well, they're really great to bring in and lead the executive staff or the company that you were either unable to convince, or someone that like you specifically thought wasn't getting a lot of traction and priority. They can all make that a priority. So if they're like, hey, we got these other projects for you, why don't you pay attention to those? But you're like, hey, this thing's really important. You should pay attention to this, and someone should be driving it. They're really good to bring in so that those initiatives still get completed. And you have someone who's competent, both the communication to the business, but also to IT. It can kind of bridge that gap and make sure that the vision that you either have or some executive has gets accomplished with the resources that you wouldn't have internally otherwise. Now, as I said earlier, like, you want to make sure that you're not handing these folks super technical tasks. And I want to differentiate a few of the roles right now between these guys. You know, a lot of times they get confused with like solution engineers. They get confused with technical architects. In fact, that's probably the thing they get confused with the most, is technical architects, but they're not technical architects, right? You know, it's a little egotistical as a technical architect, but I played the role of solution architect many times. And so like, I understand the difference, and the difference is quite huge. And one is basically a technical architect only focuses on the technical capabilities. They actually don't care about the overarching solution, the aspect of like, they need to buy this system or build this system. That's not their kind of prerogative. What they care about is like, okay, now that I have a set of solutions, how do I technically get to fulfill that desired plan through integration, through like building code? Like, if we have to build it, what do I build? How do I build it to make it fit what the solution architects put together? That's more often the way that it works, rather than, you know, solution architect doing any real technical work, or really like telling the tech team how it works at a low level. Like, usually it's very high level of like, hey, we bought this system and we bought this other system and we need them to talk to each other. They don't say like, hey, like this API over here, you need to call this API over there. Like, that doesn't really happen. That's what a technical architect does. What they're going to say is like, hey, we bought these two things, or you built this custom thing and we bought this other thing, and now we need them to exchange data, and here's the results that we want from that exchange. It's going to be much more on that level. And so you really want to pay attention when you're plugging in a solution architect to communicating to the business at a high level. Here's the systems that we think are going to make this work. Here's how they're going to interplay together. And then having the technical team get into the nitty-gritty details of like, okay, like, how do we actually plug that in and how do we do that? So as we talked about before, BSAs are going to like document all this lower level stuff. So once the solution architect has a high level architected vision, they're going to hand that to a BSA to get the specific low level business requirements. And then they're going to hand that to a technical team, again, to do low level business requirements or low level technical requirements in terms of what they're going to put there. And so you get all of that coordination, even though the solution architect is really just up here, up at 10,000 feet in the clouds, kind of orchestrating everything that's going on. And that's where you want them. That's their specific goal. And you're probably not going to run into them until you have very large projects, and you don't really need them unless you have very large projects. You could probably cobble one together through a few different things, but honestly, in corporations that are under 10 people, you're probably having whoever manages or directs that team doing a lot of this stuff. And they're probably getting a lot of executives like inserting their will of like, these are the systems we're going to buy and this is the stuff we're going to do, versus the other way around. And so that's why solution architects are super important to bring in from outside consulting agencies at that level, because they can push back against those executives and be like, hey, look, we know that you want this from a business perspective. We know that you've used X, Y, and Z system in the past, but this is really going to be the best solution architecture for the thing that you want and for the team that you have to be able to implement that and support it going forward. And so that's really where they fit in and when you should use them. Well, great. Thanks again for watching. You know, this is our second video in how to build a systems team kind of series. We went over the BSA first, now it's solution architect. So we're making our way through the teams pretty well. Hope you guys are liking that. You know, if you want to watch more videos like this, please like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. But really also just please comment in the comments down below. We really want to understand what you guys want to hear. If there's any parts of these that you may have disagreements with, especially when I define these roles very specifically, or if there's any roles that you're curious about or have heard about that you really don't understand, like client partner or some other random term or title that you were like, I don't really know what that means. We really want to hear from you guys. So please, again, just in the comments, let us know what's going on. Otherwise, subscribe, and we come out with videos every week. So we'll see you next time. Thanks.